Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise and get straight to the heart of what's happening in the information landscape. This week, we're zeroing in on June 16th to the 22nd, 2025. It was quite a week for FIMI foreign information manipulation and interference. Our goal, like always, is to pull out the key insights for you, especially since you're already tuned into the, let's say, finer points of information warfare. We've got two really potent sources today. One takes a hard look at how certain players, well, cynically use global crises. The other tackles the, frankly, shocking reality of hate speech often going unpunished as an international crime.
That's right. And what's really striking here isn't just the tactics themselves. I mean, many of you know these plays already. It's the sheer hypocrisy involved and the very real damage these campaigns cause. If you connect the dots, you see this pattern, almost like a standard operating procedure, of exploiting global events. Plus, this dangerous gap in the law when it comes to the absolute worst kinds of propaganda.
Okay, let's dive into that first piece. It's the Disinformation Review from June 19th. And it really doesn't hold back. It opens with this pretty stark line. In the Kremlin's playbook of manipulation, every crisis, every tragedy is an asset. And that motto they mention, never let a good crisis or tragedy go to waste.
Wow. That really says something about the mindset, doesn't it?
It really does. And you see this pattern again and again. The article points it out. Natural disasters, political shifts like Maidan back in 2014, ongoing conflicts like Gaza. It's never about finding solutions, you know? It's always about finding leverage, finding an angle, shifting the narrative.
Yeah, and the whole Israel-Iran escalation recently, a perfect example according to the article. First, there's this big push to manufacture innocence for Iran. You've got pro-Kremlin outlets saying Iran's peaceful and fairly attacked, claiming Iran never invaded anyone, never did assassinations, never wanted nukes.
Right. Which is, I mean, come on. Exactly. It completely ignores the documented stuff, the proxies like Hezbollah, the Houthis, the state-sponsored hits, the uranium enrichment that's way beyond civilian needs. It's like they're trying to rewrite history in real time.
Well, it's strategic, isn't it? This manufacturing innocence is designed to make any Israeli response look worse.
Yeah.
You know, to make Iran seem like the victim on the world stage. It's a pretty transparent way to give cover to an ally, regardless of what they've actually done.
And then you get the delicious irony of sovereignty for me, but not for thee. The article points out how Putin, the Russian Foreign Ministry, they rushed out to condemn Israeli strikes. Oh, it's a violation of sovereignty, the UN Charter. This sudden, deep respect for international law, it would be touching if it wasn't so obviously cynical.
Absolutely, because that devotion, that respect for international law, it just vanishes when you talk about Russia's own invasion of Ukraine, which is, arguably the biggest breach of sovereignty in Europe since World War II.
Right.
It just shows that for the Kremlin, international law isn't a principle. It's a tool. You use it when it helps, you ignore it when it doesn't. Simple as that.
And the final act, the self-serving peacemaker. Moscow jumping in, offering to mediate in the Middle East, trying to look like a, quote, a responsible global actor.
Yeah, the audacity is something else.
It really is.
As EU High Representative Kajim Kallas said pretty bluntly, Russia isn't exactly a credible mediator here, especially not when Iran is sending weapons to Russia to attack Ukraine. So this whole peacemaker thing, it's pure theater. It's about grabbing attention, getting a foothold in the region, trying to buff up their image, all while they're still bombing Ukrainian cities. And let's not forget the side benefits for them, right?
Oh, yeah.
Higher oil prices help their economy, which is under sanctions, and it pulls Western attention, maybe aid, away from Ukraine. The article nails it. Don't be deceived.
And the review didn't stop there. The Disinfo radar section caught some of the usual tricks that week, too, like the classic unsubstantiated corruption claims, this time against U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham and, 22 other members of Congress? No evidence, no specifics, naturally. And it just happened to pop up right after Graham pushed for more Russia sanctions. Funny how that works.
Well, yeah. And it makes you wonder about the source, right? When it comes from places like Sputnik and RT, I mean, these are the outlets that gave us the U.S. biolabs nonsense, the imaginary French troops in Ukraine. You kind of have to take anything they say with a huge grain of salt.
Yeah.
Or just dismiss it.
Right. Then there was the spin on Germany's first National Veterans Day, turning it into some kind of Nazi revival, claiming celebrating Bundeswehr vets was really about honoring the SS and Wehrmacht.
It's just absurd. But it fits the pattern.
How so?
It's twisting Germany's right to defend itself. It's support for Ukraine, which is about upholding international law, twisting that into warmongering or Nazism. It's a standard Kremlin play. Paint any defense against them or support for their targets as aggressive or fascist, It's meant to scare people, divide allies.
And almost couldn't make this up. The latest conspiracy about NATO force-feeding LGBTIQ plus ideology to
Oh,
Moldovans.
yes, that one.
Part of a plot, apparently, to turn them against Russia and destroy Orthodox Christianity, timed perfectly after Moldova's Pride March.
And that one serves multiple purposes, doesn't it? It paints rights activists as NATO puppets. It plays on homophobic fears, links it all back to the usual Kremlin stories about color revolutions and Russia being encircled by the West. And at the same time, it stirs up trouble inside Moldova, tries to weaken its ties to the West, especially with elections coming up. Using homophobia like this, it's a nasty but well-used tool in their kit.
Okay, so shifting from that kind of cynical geopolitical game playing, let's talk about something deeper, more insidious. Hate speech. Ilya Nuzov's article, Hate Speech, an International Crime, from June 18th. It really highlights this urgent problem, the lack of accountability for inciting hatred and violence.
Yeah, and that's the really disturbing part. You have leaders acknowledging at the highest levels how Russian propaganda is fueling the war in Ukraine. But then you have the International Day of Countering Hate Speech, and the article points out this massive contradiction. The people spewing the hate, the ones paving the way for atrocities, they often get away with it. There's impunity.
So when this article talks about hate speech in the context of international crime, what exactly is it focusing on? It's not just any insult, right?
No, exactly. It's not trying to define every kind of offensive speech. It's really zeroing in on the stuff that incites, promotes, or justifies violence, hatred, or discrimination against a group based on race, religion, nationality, that kind of thing, especially when it's linked to, terrible outcomes.
And we see this constantly in Russian state media rhetoric about Ukraine.
Oh, absolutely. The article gives examples, repeated calls for extreme violence, real terror, complete destruction, the way Ukrainians are dehumanized, called filth, scum, Satanists.
Yeah.
And it's not just direct calls to violence. It's also weaving these false histories, these conspiracy theories, these mirror accusations, like calling Ukrainians Nazis for resisting or claiming they committed genocide. It's all designed to incite hatred.
And the people behind this, like Solovyov, Simonian, they run huge networks pumping this stuff out. Yet the article says holding them accountable under current international criminal law, almost impossible.
Which is just staggering when you think about the impact. And it's not like prosecuting hate speech internationally is totally new. The article reminds us about Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda chief, and Julius Streicher. He was actually convicted of persecution as a crime against humanity, specifically for, quote, infecting Germans with the virus of anti-Semitism.
Okay.
And we've had the Genocide Convention since 1948. It's illegal to directly call for acts meant to destroy a whole group. Courts have convicted people for inciting genocide and ethnic cleansing based on that.
Okay, so if we have those precedents, those conventions,
Right.
where's the gap? Why can't people like Solovyov be prosecuted now?
Right, here's the core problem the article lays out. Apart from the Genocide Convention, there isn't an international law that specifically criminalizes inciting mass violence against civilians, unless you can prove genocidal intent, the intent to destroy the group as such. So the Rome Statute, the one for the International Criminal Court, it covers inciting genocide. But it doesn't explicitly ban calling for crimes against humanity or aggression. And that's a massive hole, especially now with social media amplifying this stuff instantly, globally.
Wow. So let me get this straight. The example the article uses. If a propagandist calls for mass deportation of kids as part of destroying a group, that could be incitement to genocide.
Potentially.
But if they call for mass torture of civilians just to, say, crush resistance during an occupation, that's not explicitly illegal under international criminal law.
That's the loophole. Unless you can tie it directly to the incredibly high bar of genocidal intent, the incitement itself isn't specifically criminalized at that international level for crimes against humanity. It's a really significant gap.
That seems absurd.
It is. But the article points to a possible way forward. There's an opportunity now. The UN General Assembly gave the okay last November for states to start talking about a new treaty specifically on crimes against humanity. And that treaty, if it goes through, would require countries to criminalize these acts, including incitement, and take steps to prevent them. That could bridge the gap.
But it's not a done deal, right? The article mentions there's still debate about what kind of hate speech should fall under this. Where's the line between criminal incitement and just, disinformation or insults?
That's true. There is debate. Drawing those lines is always tricky. However, the article makes a strong point. Over 100 countries already have laws against some form of hate speech, usually discriminatory incitement to violence. And that lines up with international human rights law, like the ICCPR, which says states must prohibit hate advocacy that incites discrimination, hostility, or violence. So the argument is, look, there's no good reason not to prohibit directly inciting crimes against humanity under international law, too. And doing so is perfectly compatible with freedom of expression, properly understood.
And given how fast this stuff spreads online now, not just Ukraine, but conflicts everywhere,
Exactly. The potential for harm is immense.
the article's conclusion is pretty stark. Therefore, now is the right time to act. So, bringing these two strands together, what does it all mean? We've got this cynical exploitation of crises for political points and this alarming legal failure to hold people accountable for inciting mass violence. It really paints a picture of information manipulation that's sophisticated, far-reaching, and often, disturbingly, consequence-free for the perpetrators.
Yeah, and if you connect it to the bigger picture, it shows the fight against disinformation isn't just about fact-checking tweets. It's much deeper. It's about understanding the strategy behind the lies, seeing the real violence they fuel, and demanding accountability where the laws just haven't kept up with how fast and effectively Feeney operates today.
So for you listening in, the takeaway seems pretty clear. The headlines might give you one story, but when you dig into the sources, like we've done today, you find a reality that's way more complex and honestly, often pretty infuriating.
Right. And the real challenge, maybe for all of us, isn't just spotting the manipulation. It's thinking about the underlying vulnerabilities, the systems, the legal gaps that let this stuff thrive. It's about moving past just observing and asking what could actually make a difference here. So, thinking about what we discussed, what stands out to you as the most critical vulnerability these analyses reveal? Something to chew on.